Okay, to keep this video shorter, I'm not going to try to recalibrate. I got 9.45 millimeters, which to me is really close to 9.5. There's all kinds of other errors that will be introduced anyway, so I don't think it's a big deal. So I'm going to go ahead and cut a strip of mirror from a big piece like this, 9.5 millimeters wide. Hopefully it's going to come out to 9.45. Like I said, there will be variations. You want to be sure and clean the mirror on this side so that you don't have any goo or tape or anything like that on it. There's a little bit because this has been sitting around in a box for a while. But we're going to try this the way it is. I'll start on a piece of the scrap I just produced because that helps keep this from chipping. And at this end, the metal fence is going to help keep that from chipping. It will a little bit, but it's usually on the non-silvered side, so it doesn't matter. And what you'll want to do is pull this mirror downward against this. See, it would be easy for me to have it cut crooked like that if I tilt it up. See that gap there? So we want this flush. So what I do is I make it flush and go over like that. And then this is where I start the cut. Then we cut this film off the back. So you just have to cut it right here. And then let's make a measurement and see what that involves. 9.52, that's not bad. See how much greater it is up there? All the way up to 10. So what that means is the cut on this side, when I cut this strip before, was at an angle. That means that machine wasn't lined up, or maybe it was the factory emerging edge, and so it didn't line up with the 90 degrees on that edge. So I'm gonna do another one, and we'll hopefully come out pretty even on that one. There's also variations that are introduced by merely taking the mirror and snapping it with my fingers. If you really want a straight edge, and I can see here that there's a slope on this side consuming that last 10 or 12 millimeters, that is going to make this narrower than the rest of it. And that's a real common occurrence when you break a mirror like that. You can also, after you've scored the mirror, put it across an edge that you know is straight, like a ruler or a piece of copper foil on a board. Press it on there and it will often cut a lot straighter or break straighter. So let's see what we got. 9.57, 9.71, 9.54. See, that's a little more uniform. It's, you know, my digital calipers have seen better days. So I got 9.59, 9.6, 9.57, like that. So that's the way it should be because it's a gentle, very gentle curve along there. You wouldn't ever notice. All right, now we're ready to cut the length. Okay, I had to start over on that because I bumped the tripod with my foot. I know that my mirrors, I want them 9.5 millimeters wide nominally and 62.5 millimeters long. I also know that I should cut off about 1/4 to a 1/2 inch on each end because there's always a little, I don't know if you can see that in there or not, it's a little ramp or something there, and I can't use it anyway, so I have to cut it off. And if you're okay with the arbitrary amount that's already on there, you can just score it there. Start on a scrap piece. This is just to take off that little extra. And now I can do the other end too, but really that's determined by how many mirrors I get out of this. I usually just don't measure it and just cut until they're gone. If your mirrors are going to be less than the capacity of the digital, which in this case is 150, I also made several that were 200 millimeters. If you have one of those, you're fortunate because you can go up to an 8-inch long mirror without having to measure by hand. So I know that I have to have 62.5 millimeter length mirrors. So I just dial that into this, and I should get a few out of this strip that I have here. So we are getting close, real close. See, I'm not as skilled as I once was with my hands. I think that's close enough, 62.45. So now that means I'll be able to cut this to length without doing any manual measurement. I'll show you the manual measurement later here. So we're going to start on this. I think I let that move while I was cutting. I get a little nervous sometimes. But we'll check it on this and see. .7. See, it came out larger anyway. But there are measurement errors between this readout and this one. You could try to pair them up exactly, and it just never works because they're just too unforgiving of each other. Okay, so then I have one mirror, and then I can just do the next one if I deem that acceptable for length. Should be awful close, 627 or 628. Well, there I go, 6257. So I did let that first one slip. Let's get another one. I really need to make about 30 of these, but I'm not going to do that today because I'm trying to get this video out so people can use their mirror machines better. So let's see what we got. 62.4, so that's acceptable to me. So I have 3 mirrors here now, and they're all awfully darn close to one another in length. And then I can move on to the next step, which would be assembling the mirrors however configuration I want to do to put them in the kaleidoscope. What I'm going to show you next is how to cut a mirror longer than what your digital will read. Okay, now we're going to override the digital with this aluminum strip, which hopefully you got one with your machine. If you didn't, you could also use a nice piece of metal that you have, or a very thin metal ruler, something like that, that both edges are parallel. And you can check that parallelness with your digital calipers to see if it's pretty close. Otherwise, you're gonna end up with non-square ends when you cut it. So all it has to be is a little wider than this. This is actually much wider than it needs to be. What I like to do is set this for 10 millimeters because then I have a known. And I end up making a score mark on this little override strip, okay? So we just go like that. It won't hurt the glass cutter because aluminum is a whole lot softer than glass, okay? So now I know that's pretty darn close to 10 millimeters. It's probably a little bit off. So if I want this to be 170 millimeters, say, because this only goes up to 150, then I would measure it. Oh, and I like these Sharpie markers that are ultra fine. They work pretty good for this. They do dry out after a while, but if you keep the lid on them when you're not using them, they do well. So let's get over on the metric side. And if I want it to be 170, okay, so we just line that mark up with the one on the metal thingy, and we get a piece of scrap to start a cutter on, and voila. That's cracked off. Oops, dropped my knife. And there you go. You've got a 170 millimeter long, let's hope, if I figured that right. Yep, 170 millimeter long strip now. It's 9.5 wide. And that's how you do that.